looking positive. Yeah. Oh, I fixed it strangely.
I've never been in love before. Then all at once, it's you forevermore. I've never been in love before. I thought my heart was safe. I thought I knew the score. But this is wine that's all too strange and strong. I'm filled with foolish song, and out my song must pour. So please forgive this helpless haze I'm in. I've really never been in love before. I've never been in love before. And all at once it's you. Now it's you forevermore. But this is wine that's all too strange and strong. I'm filled with foolish song, and out my song must pour. So please forgive this helpless haze I'm in. I've really never been in love before. I've never been in love, and now it's you. It's you forevermore. Now it's you forevermore. It's you forevermore.
All right, all right. This is my guest today, Alyssa Allgood. Hi, Alyssa.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hold on. I'm just doing one more thing.
I thought my
And yeah, for those of you joining on Facebook and who would rather be on YouTube, apparently I haven't fixed it yet. Well, oh God. Um, but at least it doesn't stop me from being on. Yeah, so that's good. So, hi,
Hello.
it's December 2024, whatever that means.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
This has been a really big year for me. So I think the last couple weeks of this year, I'm kind of taking that time, still have a handful of gigs, but kind of getting into a little bit of a quieter time, which I appreciate and definitely feel like that kind of reflective moment of kind of just looking back at the year and feeling proud of some things that happened, grateful, and, excited for getting ready for the things in the new year as well.
Cool.
Yeah. And how
Yeah.
about for you? Are you a New Year's person, resolutions, those kind of things?
No.
No.
No, because every day I basically do what I want. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just, I'm always doing my best,
yeah.
it's a normal thing. Always doing my best. Things are exciting if you have
Mhm.
some new things that are perking your interest and
Yeah.
excitement, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not really one to look back and feel bad for what I've done. I just
Sure.
like to take responsibility on the way.
Yeah.
That way it doesn't, keep adding up in the suitcase.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, but yeah, it's been a nice year. Time is so funny though, because I'm sure you're thinking about this. You're not very old, but still, I think being able to reflect at this point about
Mhm.
what's been happening for you,
Oh,
you know, the good experiences are great, fantastic, incredible while you're in them, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's the joy of the whole thing.
Right.
And and then it just becomes a memory,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm getting to that age where I think that more and more, it's just like this moment is important, and if I don't have to stress and obsess.
Hmm.
But
Yeah. Yeah, something I've thought about a lot too, especially as we like, prepare whether it's like a specific recording or like a gig, in a couple months where you spend all this time preparing and then you get there and then it's gone. And I think
yeah,
this is kind of this, not that it makes it any less special, but there's definitely it's a sort of fleeting
yeah,
thing that happens over and over again, which is kind of beautiful, but also kind of makes you, I think, appreciate just being in that moment when you have it.
yeah, yeah. And it gives you a reason to know why you're working so hard to get there.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
of course we do work like, you know, my
Yeah.
husband's not a musician, so he's um we talk about this a lot. We've been together about 23 years, and we talk about it a lot, because like if I want to do something new, he'll say, "Okay, so what are the returns?"
Yeah.
Financially is his
Sure.
mind first.
Right.
So I'm always reminding him we artists do not think about that first.
Mhm.
We just have this kind of obsessive desire to
Yeah.
create. And we know if we've created something really good, once we get there, it's like, the feeling is, right? It's
Yeah.
it's heaven.
Mhm.
So we're really lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, hopefully we continue on doing that,
Mhm.
and our life is good and improves, and you know, we can affect others.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there are some artists who really consider that they're like every day,
Mhm.
maybe. I'm not really sure. I think there are some artists who think I'm going to affect people's lives,
Yeah.
and maybe they think that every day, and that's their driving force. Some artists look like that. I don't know if that's true though.
Mhm.
I think it's just I'm alive, I'm creating, it feels
Yeah.
good, I want to get there, I got there, it's great. Okay,
Yeah.
next, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're I don't know exactly how old you are, but I'm thinking pretty young.
I'm 32.
Okay. So that's on the pretty young side.
Yeah.
So, but I would say that the ball is rolling now,
Mhm.
collecting the moss as
Yeah.
it goes along. It's getting bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
Was there a moment in time when you look back and you say, "Oh, yeah, the ball really started moving there."
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I also feel like so much of what we do, as you were just we were just sort of discussing it, it is just about that, I think, just that commitment of like showing up and working and getting the thing. And I think just as you're doing that more, than you kind of have the moment where you look around, you're like, oh, I'm like doing the thing that I want to be doing, or I'm in that space, which I think is definitely part of it. I do feel like in this last year with my new recording that came out in April, that was my first that features my original music. So kind of taking that step as a composer, and I think with that, feeling like I have a little bit more specific things that I want to say in my music for myself. And so I think like honoring that and sort of creating that space has opened up kind of how I think about, going after certain gigs or how I'm kind of presenting myself. And I think just being a bit more sort of intentional with that. I think I've certainly developed that in the last couple of years, but definitely just like this last year. And I think with that also sort of feeling, I don't know if brave is the right word, but feeling like
Yeah.
something enough to sort of just start saying like, I want to like do that thing or be in that space or make this kind of art, and then like working to do the thing that I said I want to do versus feeling like things can be very far away. And so I think sort of shifting that mentality of like, oh, I could go after that thing that I want, and that's a beautiful thing to try to go after kind of larger goals and things like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. The hi Hiroki, Ohio gozaimasu. Yeah, the part of composing and bringing that music into your performance, that's that's something for me too that I think about a lot because um, gosh, there's so much to
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
over the years. I've been pretty much composing about 25 years.
Oh,
So over that time, there's been these different experiences
mm,
in my own mind,
sure.
really. You know, uh, do I want to do like a whole, just I mean, touching on a little bit. Do I want to do a whole show of it of originals? And then, people always say, "Oh, well, you got to put in the standards so people know what you do." Um, and then when the compositions come out, I mean, this is another thing, I've written folk songs, I've
Mm,
written really jazz songs, I've written alternative songs, so then there's going through realizations of that.
mm,
Um, and all writers of all sorts go through that.
mm,
It's not just always this one style that
right.
you create. It's who you are. It's all
Mm,
the aspects of who you are, and it's always changing,
yeah.
which as jazz people, we're very fortunate to have a deeper understanding of that.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, in my experience, I think started writing, I mean, I just really think only a couple years ago, and I think part of it is I think I kind of held myself back from writing for a while because I felt like it had to sound like a certain thing, being like a jazz musician first. But I love what you said is like just whatever we're writing, it's just part of who we are, and so just kind of being open to like exploring wherever that path and that kind of melody might lead, even if it ends up being a slightly different genre or feel. I think is so open. And I think like the best writers and the best artists are people who are just kind of limitless and they
yeah,
don't limit themselves to be a specific thing, which I think is really important.
yeah. I think it's really interesting. You know that woman, I forget her name. She wrote like what is it called? Like Water is to Chocolate or Chocolate is to Water. She also wrote a book called Big Magic. Um,
Oh, yes. I actually think I have that book. I forget what her name is. It's Elizabeth something.
Elizabeth, right?
Uh,
And she in that book, excuse me, in that book, it's really a good book, and it came after her famous book that
mm,
became a movie.
yeah. Eat,
So
Pray, Love, I think, right?
yeah, Eat, Pray, Love, right? And it was a great book, to read as a growing artist.
Hmm.
The book gives you permission to be creative.
Yeah.
And but she lays it all out very transparently about what she's been through in her state of mind,
Mm.
like from the beginning. Hi, Taylor. Oh, Taylor says hi. Taylor Hatch. Um, we've passed each other, but it's been super fun following your journey.
Aw,
He's a guitarist.
tuning in.
So, but so she for instance, she says when she started writing, she decided to make a commitment to herself to write every day from now then on.
Yeah.
And what she found was she would come up with something very creative that she liked, and then the next day she would just feel like not writing about it anymore and just like kind of bleh.
Yeah.
And but because she had committed to herself to write every day, the next day she wrote again and she'd come out of it. She said it was a pattern that happened with every project. And so things like that. So she actually gave a very transparent insight,
Hmm.
to the process, which yeah, was really great. And I've experienced that particular thing over the years in writing, like writing a really simple folk song and just going, oh, that's not a great jazz song. And and then it took me a year to continue writing after that. And then I thought, what am I doing? It's so stupid, just write. You could throw it away. What's the
Yeah,
big deal? You're stopping
absolutely.
that flow.
Yeah.
So yeah. But also, one really big thing for me, and maybe you've experienced it, is um, where let's see, how do I put this? Where the persona of my writing comes in my presentation. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but how do I deal with this persona that includes my writing? How do
Hmm.
I deal with it? Do I, promote that? Like that's because you said in the beginning that, um, well, basically what I got from it was um, how you're presenting yourself. What do you want to present yourself as you're going along? And of course, we need to think about that because we're, you know, I mean, unless you're just one of those lucky artists who has everybody else thinking for you, you've got to think about that. So yeah, that has been kind of deep under there, like in a lot of my life. Who am I going to present myself as? I remember asking great guitar player here, Peter Sprague, about this because he had very distinct, different creations, and he was just fabulous, fabulous guitar player. And he just said, "Yeah, I do it all." And just that, like, real simple thing
I
was
love
like,
that.
"Oh,
Yeah, duh.
yeah, I don't have to be one thing." And okay, if you don't like this song, fine. You like this song?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's I mean, such a freeing place to get to that place of just saying like truly who I am is all of these things and like being okay with maybe this particular thing doesn't resonate or those kind of things. But I think that because what we're doing also, I mean, we're just talking about the creative process, but of course there's also the like business and marketing
Oh yeah,
side of things. So being able to kind of be specific a little bit about like this is what who
yeah,
I am or those things. But I even do feel like even though I've been like writing original music is like I still love singing standards and have that. So I try not to like be like, oh, I can only do this specific thing.
yeah,
And I'm kind of more broadly like trying to think about just representing, singing music that I just feel very deeply about. And
yeah,
this kind of current moment has been kind of a lot of like my own writing. I find a lot of like my original music, I talk a lot about sort of like self-love and kind of discovery, connection with other people and sort of like growth and those kind of things. Like I really believe in kind of like empowerment through music. So that's been like something I try to bring into my music, and it's been really great sharing some of those tunes, with an audience. Then like after the gig, they'll tell me like, oh, I felt like that was about me, or like this situation that happened, like I know exactly that I felt that thing. And so that just feels so special as, as a performer always, but as a composer, right? To just like that somebody's like, hey, like I felt like I was in your song, that's like
yeah,
that's the best thing in the world, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Mm,
Taylor, he has lots of great questions, so I'm gonna
yeah,
just look at his questions.
sure.
Um, I like this question, Taylor. I find a lot of vocalists think about this, but in your opinion, what characteristics make a great rhythm section when they work with a vocalist? It's good, right?
Great question.
Yeah.
Um, well, I have so many answers to that, so I'm just gonna like
Okay.
I I think for me, especially because like I've been like more like writing music where I feel like it is even like in the opening track was like an arrangement that I did of a standard. I feel like a lot of my music it's a little bit more like open and like I really want a rhythm section who not like just bulldozes me in the music, but is like willing and like excited about like making like bold moves in the music and like really creating and responding and interacting. I think sometimes this more like younger players I think can be with a vocalist maybe afraid to like dig in and play because they think maybe they're just supposed to be like an accompanist role. I don't want me personally don't want that at all. I want to like feel like I'm being treated just like a horn player or another part of the rhythm section where I'm singing something and there's a response or I'm responding to something and feeling like I'm really a part of like moving the music forward. So I feel like finding a rhythm section who is like trusting in that and very like open to like growing the music together. So I think that there requires like a level of um, like listening, of course, but I think like sensitivity, and I also just think trust of like creating that space together. And then with that, have had experiences where it maybe goes a little bit too far the other direction, where someone just like changes the whole thing because they've just decided it's going to go this certain way. So trying to also make sure that like musical choices, I'm sure you've been there too, you know,
Oh yeah.
but trying to also work with people who are like making musical choices that are
Yeah.
choices to support the music and
Uh-huh.
you know those kind of things. So those are really important to me, and to really feel like you're working with like real collaborators versus feeling like it's the singer in the front and then there's just like a band who's backing. I just
Yeah.
like don't jive with that at all.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my long answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Yes, I have been through many of those things
Yeah,
myself. Yeah, and or on the more negative side, drummers who aren't really listening to me,
yeah.
piano players who play the melody
Oh,
for me, instead, I mean, not in a good arrangement style,
sure.
and piano players who change the chord because they think the note I'm singing isn't, appropriate or that I don't know what I'm doing,
Sure.
stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, the good stuff is, um, it's good, it's
Yeah.
just, like you said, responsive and treating me like an instrument. I'm
Yeah.
a musician. I'm a
Yeah.
musician. My instrument is my voice. But yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. After that, it's just like there's of course, your choices of who you like a little better because they play this kind of style or sound or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Um, and this is almost like a Taylor interview. So, but I mean, I love his questions. So I'm just checking,
Yeah.
see if yeah. He liked From Here. He loved Kendrick Scott.
Yeah.
Um, well, he's asking a um very direct question, but
Okay.
I'm going to change this a little bit. I mean, he said he wants to know, was there anything that you felt could have been better? And you may want to answer that or may not, or maybe just different, maybe, or a different song. I mean, of course, the projects we work on um, come out and then we listen and we really are happy or something is a little off or, yeah. How many albums have you made?
That was my fourth album.
Okay.
So I feel like it was such a different album for me because it was like all of my own music. And so I feel like I just had such a better like artistic vision and sort of feeling like more able to really articulate like what I wanted to hear and those kind of things. So I feel very proud of that. And then of course like the band I put together is like a band of all-stars, so they just played the music just so well, and we're also of course incredible musicians, but also just like very kind, very warm, like open people, who, like, I met them all in the studio. They all just like made me feel immediately just like I was one of them, and that I something that I will like just cherish that feeling forever. And I feel like, as I was talking about kind of the question about rhythm section, all of those musicians who are on my latest record, I think, are just at that highest level of like really just being so focused on following the music, and that kind of like sort of like childlike sort of curiosity about like where the song can go. And there's so many moments that like weren't on the score, but you can hear like Kendrick lining up with something that like Geoffrey Keezer played together, and just kind of those like beautiful moments whenever those happen. And I feel like there was such a good kind of energy and like vibe of the tunes. I think if anything different, I think for me, now that I've like gone through that experience of like, here's my original music, now I think I'm just continuing to like learn more about my own writing style, and maybe we'll just continue kind of exploring like, I think there's some good variety and those kind of things, but just continuing to explore, making sure I have like a nice kind of diverse just sort of presentation about what I'm trying to do. I think that some of the tracks I think could maybe be a little shorter. Well, that was just, I only remember that I got like a review that was just like they were all kind of long, so maybe they could have been a little shorter for like radio, I suppose. But other than that, I feel like it was just a really good experience to record with them. And then it's kind of one of those moments, even though I've been playing that music like with my band here in Chicago, and I write everything at the piano, it's such a different experience every time you bring it to somebody and you're kind of trusting them to like add their thing to it. So I feel like that just sort of came to life in a really beautiful way. So I was like very happy with how that turned out.
Yeah. How did this record come about? You said nobody in the band you knew?
I knew Greg Ward, who is the alto player. He's a friend of mine from Chicago. So I released this album on a label called Next Records, owned by Jeff Baker, who's a great vocalist. And it was kind of one of those conversations of like thinking about what I want to do for a next record. And I knew I wanted to do kind of like my original music, and kind of thinking about like sort of trying to make a bigger statement. And I think he kind of floated the idea of sort of putting a kind of band together of that caliber. And then I sort of just made my like wish list of who I'd like to work with, and kind of started reaching out. And I also did like a big crowdfunding campaign to like fund everything like that. And so that was also my first time doing that kind of experience, which was great, sort of overwhelming to have that support and those kind of things. But I think it was definitely like an intentional choice of, again, try to elevate kind of like what I'm doing into that kind of level.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, Geoffrey Keezer, where does he live? Does he live here on the West Coast or?
He's in New York.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a wonderful player.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where did you record?
We recorded at the Gradwell House, which is in New Jersey.
Okay.
It ended up being, they're all the musicians, well, except for Greg and I, were both in Chicago, but everybody else was like based in New York, so it was easy enough for them to kind of drive over, and had a really
Yeah,
nice experience there.
yeah. And your arrangements, how did you go through that process? Did you say what you wanted? Did they come up with something and then you okayed it, or how did that process go?
I would say that like most of what's on there is just like my music, and a lot of what I have is, I mean, I do have obviously like some very specific like written out like bass lines and stuff, but a lot of what I write is more sort of like a lead sheet, with like hits and description of rhythmic style and those kind of things. So, before the recording, sent them all like tracks of me like from live gigs and those kind of things. We did have a rehearsal in the studio. And some things change. Actually, like one of the tunes of mine was originally in 5, and then we actually put it in 7. And so that was kind of a fun experience for me of like relearning how to like sing this song and improvise in a different meter. So that was really fun. And I'm glad that we did that. That's actually like how I perform it now. So that was just nice. And I think that was something actually Kendrick had suggested, just based on kind of the tempos and styles of the other tunes, just making sure it felt like not too similar and those kind of things. So there were some of those moments that was like the biggest change, but everything else, it was really more of just like, Again, unless it was like a very specific, I did write out like the horn lines and things like that, and again, some of the bass lines and a few voicings, but like what they just like how they played it was definitely like they brought their own thing to it, but it definitely felt like organic. And I think even maybe some small changes, but again, was kind of done in this way of just like suggesting, not being like, oh, this is bad, let's do it this way. It was just
Yeah.
sort of like, hey, why don't we try it this thing, and being able to kind of like just hear things in a different way. But it definitely felt very much like my thing played with their specific voices that then
Yeah.
made it the final product, which I hope that makes sense. But
Yeah. Could we hear the 1 and 7?
sure, yeah.
Where will I find it?
I know it's definitely on like all the streaming platforms. It might actually also be on YouTube because I think sometimes they like upload all the like tracks, but that one is called Other Side.
Other side.
And a reviewer did think it was about a breakup, so I want to like clarify that this is my pandemic song. So this is song about sort of experiencing that.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm gonna go try Spotify, since I'm having so much trouble with 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 YouTube. I don't
Mm,
know. Maybe they're finally finished with me doing, even like when I have on the artist, it's
sure.
still not good enough for them. Here's the other side.
On the other side, we made it on the other side. On the other side, we made it on the other side. There were days it felt like forever. How could we ever see that the world would bring us together closer than we used to be? But on the other side, I almost lost my mind. Can't go back in time. Stay on the other side. The other side. we made it on the other side. There were days it felt like forever. How could we ever see that the world would bring us together closer than we used to be? But on the other side, I almost lost my mind. Can't go back in time. Stay on the other side. Other side.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very nice.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that one was definitely like the biggest change of all the tunes, but I really love like how it ended up.
Yeah. Totally smooth. Great. Yeah. Well, I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the things that have been going on in your life. So let me just take a look. I'm just going to look again at your bio
Sure.
because I can't just go only on Taylor's questions. He's an interviewer too. He's really I do like this question, Taylor. What sort of things have you been thinking about when it comes to what the next generation of vocalists should know about finding their own voices? I like that.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like I've sort of seen, I think there's like maybe there always has been, I don't know, but there definitely I feel like is a trend of kind of like nostalgia where I think there are a lot of younger singers who are incredible singers and kind of capture that kind of like classic old school Sarah Vaughan, Judy Garland, that kind of thing, which I think is like so beautiful. And I think that like that's very different than like what I'm doing. I think it's a really beautiful thing. And I think it's interesting to like sort of see that trend. And I don't know if that is something that is like kind of cycles or just is kind of always there.
Yeah.
But for
You're
me,
talking like Samara Joy and right?
yeah, who's an incredible musician. And I
Yeah.
saw her live in Chicago last year and was just like, enthralled with her performance. But it's
Yeah.
like, it's a very like, takes you back to this very specific thing, which I think is just, it's just an interesting sort of thing to observe in the current time, just because it feels like it's kind of this throwback era. So I think that for me, and not to like diss that, I really do think it's a beautiful thing, but I feel like for me, it's always just trying to like encourage people to like kind of take that time to like find out like what is actually like meaningful to them and like have that connection. And I think that there's a lot of pressure, especially with like, you know, studying at a university where you have to like learn to sing a specific thing, and then maybe that feels like, okay, that's the only thing I can sing now. But just always like knowing that there's so many more options, and I think so many more styles and sort of subgenres of jazz, and so many different things. And I think of like so many artists who I think blend a lot of different styles or like have projects that are like very different. I think of somebody like Kurt Elling, who a Chicago native, like one of my favorites. Like every album he puts out is just like a little different than the one he had before. So I think that's a great or a different kind of example of that same thing of kind of finding that sound. Or you were mentioning the guitarist from your area of like, oh, I just do all the things, right? So I think it's just important to like be learning. I think just like the technique, the style, the like history of the music, and then additionally in that same moment is like really take the time of like, what are the things that like light you up about this music, that you are just so excited when you hear somebody sing that and you want to figure out what it is, or you hear somebody play something and finding out what that is, and being open to just like exploring that sort of like creative curiosity. So then if it ends up like, yes, I like love Sarah Vaughan and that's who I want to sound like, that's great. If it's like coming from that place that's like so authentic versus like, I feel like I have to sound that way. And I'm not even sure if you can necessarily tell. I think you kind of can, right? If it feels like someone's sort of just singing a certain way because they think they have to. But I think that for me is like it's just important that people know, even if they're like just starting out singing, like they should learn the style and technique, but like be learning again about the things that they actually like, and kind of developing that style that feels like individual, or at least like authentic to like who they are in that moment. And as we were already talking about, that's going to change, and it should change, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This it's like a very big subject, this
Yeah.
particular subject. I mean, and you're an educator too, so
Mm.
yeah, um, part of what's in my mind here is, teaching students to sing jazz in a jazz, if they want to sing jazz
Mm.
in a jazz style, whatever they're singing.
Yeah.
Like I have my last two records were so I call them social anthems,
Mm.
and they were music from the 70s and 80s mostly, and but I'm not going to do them, you know, like the famous versions. So,
Right.
I did them like me. And there was one particular song, a Marvin Gaye tune, and my engineer asked me if he could take the recording and make a secondary recording of a dance track.
Mm.
And he did, and it was fabulous. I mean, I never would imagine my music as, a
Sure.
dance track. Anyway, so I sent it to the UK for this guy who sends out a lot of material, and he was really it impressed upon him that it was really unique. It did, to me, it had these qualities of dance cuts, and it does, but it's a jazz singer singing, you
Hmm.
know. So, my phrasing is going to be as a jazz singer, right? Anyway, so that, and then let's see, what was I going to say about, well, oh yeah, it was something about, oh, well, give me a minute because I thought it was interesting. You being a younger singer. Oh yeah. So for me, I'm 71. So, and I've been singing all my life.
Hmm.
And when I was first in LA in my 20s, those were the days of working, 12 gigs a week, because that was what was happening. You were
Oh,
working in clubs, you were working on casuals, you were working in jazz gigs. And so you had a lot of opportunity to play with people and make mistakes and try out material, all kinds of stuff. You were building on all things. Nowadays, I don't think it's the same, even if it's a young person in the thick of the action of singing. I
hmm.
don't think it's the same as it was back then, but still people are getting experience with trying it out. But so many people that I see, they have no opportunity, and they don't know quite how to create that opportunity. I guess you could create it, but it takes an awful lot of what we were talking about before, which is the secondary thing, which is not just the creativity, but the,
Right.
preparation and
Hmm.
administration and all of that kind of stuff. So, what do you think about that? Like regarding people nowadays not really having that opportunity to, just be in the thick of it, and how are they going to get their experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really important question, and, kind of a problem, right? Because I think that there
Yeah.
are like less gigs, and but at the same time, I do feel like there is more of like an entrepreneurial kind of spirit about people, where like you said, like they can create opportunities. And I think that that's something that's always been true, but I think because of just the way that kind of the industry is, and so many of us are freelance, unsigned, independent artists, right? Where it's like, well, if we want to do this thing, like you could create that, then you have to have the kind of business mind of like, okay, well, what are the steps I have to do to actually like create that thing and develop those relationships to present my music in this way, or those kind of things. But it could also be something of like, I mean, this isn't a performance, but you have this like beautiful series where you like curate community and conversation with people. I forget what guest number I am, like 500 something, right? I mean, you've been doing
Yeah,
it.
you're 598.
Woo woo! So I mean, that's just incredible. So something like this, right? Like a virtual experience that like you've created is amazing to have that community and conversation. And I think there are opportunities, for performance that are similar that people can kind of find. But I do think that, I mean, there's still like jam sessions and other gigs. And I think like making sure that if people, you do want to study this music and be part of it, that you're like in a location where you can get access to those things. So,
Yeah,
being in a city that has a jazz scene, right? That seems obvious, but
yeah,
that's very important, obviously. So I think that, but I think, and I would also say, like, for me, I mean, I've been singing, I've lived in, I grew up in the suburbs, but I've lived in Chicago now for about, I guess, 10 years. Like, there are certainly like gigs here, but it's not like, there's like a handful of the kind of jazz clubs, right? So it's not like you're working multiple gigs every week at like the, most recognizable jazz clubs around. It's like maybe smaller gigs or those kind of things. So I still think it is about maybe creating those opportunities or seeking out like lessons or even just conversations about music with other people. So I think that there's definitely a need for people to kind of be open to like creating things for themselves. But that requires, right? I mean, the business thing, but also the like kind of self-starter feeling of like I could create that for myself, and it's worthy that I take the time to like create something for me. And that can be kind of hard for people too, but I think that's definitely an important piece of the puzzle.
yeah. Being a person like that,
Mm,
I can say that one thing I've, observed and learned is that uh, there are always going to be people who are kind of naysayers about it.
sure.
I created this gig downtown for 2.5 years. And in the beginning, I asked one of my friends who's a really great musician, what do you think about this? And he said, oh, first of all, people will never pay for parking. It was only $7. And and then he said, oh, people aren't going to pay, 20, $25 to
Mm,
come in. I'm like, why not? They're paying like, 100 times that for a country, show or yeah, I mean, why not? Jazz is
yeah,
an amazing music. Anyway, that lasted for 2.5 years until the
amazing.
place kind of couldn't do it anymore.
Sure.
But so yeah, so you definitely have to have also an attitude of and it's kind of like our career too. It's like I'm going to do this,
Yeah,
period.
yeah,
And if it doesn't work, fine, I'll just move on. Or if you don't like it, great. You don't have to come or you don't have
right.
to be a part of it or,
Yeah,
you know, just still gonna do it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think so. I have this big, you can see part of it. I have this large mural I'm in my like
Yeah,
studio. These are I call them my eight ladies. So like, like the singers who really influenced me. But I think of like Betty Carter as an example.
yeah, yeah,
There, she's over there. As somebody who like, I mean, her whole career, like from when she first started singing, she was just like, this is who I am. This is the sound I'm going to create. This is the thing I'm going to do. And like had a lot of challenges, right? Because I think that she was like, her sound was so specific and, you know, maybe people had a hard time kind of understanding it at first and those kind of things, but she was just so self-determined and like so connected with herself. And so that's just like a great example. And I was thinking about your response to that question about people finding their voice, kind of the younger generation. And you said something like, um, oh, I forget exactly what you said, but something like, this is me or something like that. And that's such an important part of it, of like actually having that like self-awareness and connection with yourself so that you really know like musically, but also non-musically, like who you are, what's important to you, your values, again, the things that you love, and then being able to say like, okay, I want to bring all that into my music because I think that's such an important connection. And so specifically with like finding your voice or kind of developing that individual sound, I think obviously that's musically based, but I think it also has to be like personally and just feeling like you know who you are and you love all the parts about yourself, the good and the less good and all everything in between.
yeah. You're giving me an idea. I have to jot it down before I
Yeah.
forget. Um, so, um,
And then one other thing actually I was going to say too, so
Yeah,
what I wrote down is, your response, you said something that you had shared that recording and the person really loved it and it was kind of different. I think it's also important, like in finding your own voice, is like not doing something just because you want it to be like different or interesting, but because it like is truly like what you find interesting. And then there's the hope, of course, that like people like it and respond to it, but it's also like being open to that maybe not being the case and like not being crushed if that's people don't like it or whatever like that. So that's another important part of that idea of finding your voice, is I think that that confidence in yourself that, hey, I'm like really doing this thing because this is who I am and it's what's important to me. And hopefully people love it and find a connection. If they don't, that's okay. You'll find people who do.
yeah, yeah. It's very interesting. Also, you know, finding having musicians who are flexible enough and open to bring who they are into whatever you present as music. You know,
Yeah.
I did this one record with Josh Nelson and Larry Coons, who's like they're the top players here, guitar and piano, and it was a beautiful, you know, relationship between us all, and um, it wasn't, it was a unique product, and we even tried to do a swing tune, but it didn't work because we weren't swinging on the record. We were
Uh-huh.
doing something else. So
Sure.
we took that song and we made it what we had been doing, which
Yeah.
was beautiful and, you know, flowery a little, and, you know, just and, you know, sensitive and intricate.
Awesome.
And but I had a few, usually when I write, it seems like I will come up with almost a series of
Mm,
things that are in a similar genre or, you
sure.
know, approach. So I have some that are kind of folky,
Hmm.
and I brought out a few of those, and, you know, they made those songs incredible, you
Yeah.
know. Um, you know, just because the chords aren't intricate or the timings aren't intricate, you know, it's yeah, so being open, having the musicians who are open and
Mm,
creative and willing. I mean, that's a big part of it too. I remember my first husband, who was very artistic. Um, he, I was with him, you know, in my early 20s, and I had this gig for 2 years every week, and they paid each musician $5 and a meal. So if I had 10, they would pay $5 to each one, but you know, $5. And so,
You couldn't even pay for your parking.
yeah. So I remember that I was, well, first of all, finding musicians who are going to do that, you
Hmm.
know, that was an experience in itself. But also, once you found them, like, who did you put together, you
Yeah.
know? And my first inclination was to think about how they played. But then he pointed out, and he really had some great ideas. He pointed out, no, it's their personalities,
Mm,
match their personalities,
yeah.
which was a whole line of thinking, you know, and it
Yeah.
worked. It worked great. Now, it might have worked the other way too. I
Sure.
don't know. That's just looking back. But that definitely was a part of my growth, you know, to kind of gather people who were similar souls, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very important thing as a band leader. It's like making sure that like, I mean, that trust and like openness, but that there's like that sort of compatibility amongst the people that you're playing with so that you can show up and just sort of like have that trust and have that sort of playfulness of where things can go. But yeah, I, you know, because the opposite of that is, especially as a band leader, is just like a nightmare.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, when you were coming up,
mhm.
you came up in Chicago,
I did. Yep.
and was your family musical at all?
Yeah, so my mom worked as a music therapist for a long time. So she, well, I think like before I was born, she did like some gigs like playing guitar and singing, but a lot of her work, she worked at a school for kids with autism, and so she was playing a lot of music like through that. And then now she doesn't perform anymore. She's a psychology professor, so still kind of connected in that world. And then my dad is not a musician, but like a very big like music lover. So I would say I didn't necessarily grow up in a home where we're like there was always a record player on or anything like that, but we definitely like listened to a lot of music together. I remember like listening to Kurt Elling with my mom and going to see him when I was pretty young, and listening to like Aretha Franklin, and just kind of growing up listening to some really good music. And then my parents were both like very supportive of me being involved in music from a young age. I started singing with the jazz band when I was in sixth grade, and singing Satin Doll, and actually I sang Skylark as a 12-year-old. Looking back at that, I'm like, that's a hard tune.
Yeah, really.
um but then so I went to a pretty small, I grew up in a like a west suburb of Chicago, pretty small school. I mean, my school total was about 500 kids, and the neighboring towns, their schools were like 3,000 kids. So it was like a pretty small school district, but had, choirs and bands and musicals, all that kind of stuff. So I was just really involved with the music department there. And then I started around that same time. I went to Janice Borla's camp, which is actually where we first met. I forget what year it was,
It was a
but I
long
started
time
going to
ago,
that
yeah.
camp when I was 12, and I went, I think, for like 8 years, and just like I remember like really liking it, but like kind of being terrified of like improvising, and just like I think I was the youngest camper that they had, but I just kind of fell in love with. I loved getting to like see the evening concerts, I think, at a young age, and just seeing that sort of like communication and openness, and just the like, I don't know, for me at that age, like the sort of like magic of it all, just sort of seeing all that. I remember just being really like enamored with that. And I also loved that the camp had like some history and, different kind of workshops where it was about really like learning different things. I really enjoyed that. And I actually did my undergrad at North Central, so I studied with Janice there. And then pretty much from there, I mean, I kind of like went like right into the city, and I started like teaching at a music store where I was singing, teaching like musical theater to like young students, which is like not my vibe, and very quickly didn't do that anymore. Then I got connected, like directing a vocal jazz ensemble at a high school and teaching private lessons, and then starting to get gigs in the city, and just kind of went right from there into that. And then I actually went back and did my master's at DePaul University in Chicago. I just did that, gosh, I guess I graduated 2 years ago with my master's. So I went back, and that was
Oh.
funny for me. I've always been like the youngest in my friends group, but then I was like the oldest person in the program. I was like, how did this happen? This is so so that was like a good experience too, of I think going back a little bit older and kind of just knowing specifically kind of what I wanted to work on, and doing some arranging for the vocal group, and kind of giving myself that time to actually really more explore writing and those kind of things, and working on sort of my pedagogy kind of thoughts and things like that. So it was a good experience, but I'm grateful for those like early experiences, early on, of just like finding the music and really loving it. I remember just even when I was young, just like loving singing with a band. And there's something just like so exciting about like being part of this like moment and this sort of experience. And I still find that to be very true.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Last night I saw, well, for 17 years, apparently, I didn't even know about it because there's so many different communities here.
Um,
Like, really? I never knew about this? How did I never know about this? So there was a trombone concert doing Christmas music that was arranged by Bill Reichenbach, who is like a renowned trombonist and arranger and composer. And it's been his music, I think, for 17 years. And last night there was at least 50 trombonists playing.
wow.
And the arrangements were so satisfying, so
Mm.
delicious. And a lot of the music was kind of in this range, right? It was with a little bit on the bottom, a little bit on the top, but lots of moving voices, independently moving voices, and with harmonies that were, for me, very satisfying.
Mm.
Um, kind of. unusual
Yeah.
and, you know, high level. And it just made me realize it seems like my hearing has been changing lately. I'm not sure exactly why, but I'm hearing things differently. Like my attention is um, particular things. I don't know. I'll tell you about it
Yeah.
when the realization really like
Sure.
clarifies for me. But I do notice that my listening has changed. It's more intense and it's more inside whatever I'm listening to. And I realized last night that or I re-realized whatever when I was growing up and singing in choruses and choirs and with my sisters too, but still with choirs or choruses that I was I think I can't remember if I was a first alto or second alto, whatever the note that I had,
Yeah.
it was the unusual
Sure.
lines, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so, and I grew to love that. I mean, they were very difficult at
Mhm.
first, but then I grew to love that. And so listening last night, I was thinking, oh, wow, yeah, this is kind of, that's where my
Yeah.
appreciation for this part of it, at least anyway, came from.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was so beautiful. Wow.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, the growth of who we are, we don't maybe necessarily think about it all the time, but it's definitely in there and
Mhm.
part of what we do, part of what we appreciate. And yeah, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Um, I was thinking of seeing a video of you and, I mean, sometimes Facebook will take it off, but so
Sure.
that's okay. That's okay. Let's see. So I'm going to share my screen so you can tell me
Okay.
which one I can look at. Um,
I need to
so
like figure out the algorithms because some of these are like super old. I do have several that are from the showcase that could be interesting. Um, Maybe those aren't even up there.
would they be somewhere else?
I wonder if I didn't make them public. Um, well, I would be okay with You Go to My Head, or there was one above that was Burned for Betty, which is from my album. That one's quite long, so we'd probably just listen to like part of it.
Up here?
Yeah, I think it was like one of the first ones.
By the way, oh, Rose Colella.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I love Rose. Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah,
I
so
I
the
haven't
yellow
seen this stuff.
pants.
What? Oh, right here. Okay.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
10 minutes, so you could just play like the first little bit. Um,
sure.
so I'd actually mentioned Betty Carter. So this is the opening track on the album. This is I did a CD release weekend at the Jazz Showcase here in Chicago. And
Uh-huh.
I actually have Kendrick on drums and then Greg Ward as on alto, who are both on the album. Julius Tucker is on piano and Ethan Fillion on bass, both Chicago artists. So this is like written in like the musical style of her arrangements that were like changing all the time, but it's also
Yeah.
the lyric is about like that fire within and feeling really committed to that kind of vision. So just kind of my little homage to the sort of inspiration that she's lent me.
Yeah, I will say that a few years ago I was in New York at the Jazz Congress,
Mm,
and they had this. They have these events. All different kinds of discussions
mm,
and workshops, seminars, whatever. They're not
yep.
workshops. They're
Yeah, I
more like.
went last year actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Are you going this year?
I'm not. No, it's the same weekend as the Jazz Education Network conference, so I'll be there.
Really? Is it the same?
I think so. It wasn't last year, so I don't know if something got changed.
Right. They usually do not do that, but maybe they
Yeah.
did this year. I'm going this year, but anyway, this one year, it was there were all these ex-members of Betty Carter's
Mm,
groups, and they were all telling,
yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
and she was She was a toughie.
Yes.
One time, this story I just thought was funny. So these musicians, when they got on the gig or after the gig, she said, "What'd you guys do today?" And they said, "Oh, hung around, took a bath, And she said, "Don't take a bath tomorrow." Because they were too relaxed. That was
That's
funny.
funny.
But she was a real tough cookie.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to go to the ladies' room a little bit, but I'm going to hear it because it's
Okay, sounds good.
far, and then I'll be
Yeah.
here. We go.
I can feel it burning deep within my soul. And as the world keeps turning, I know where to go. Embers live inside of me, never fading, glowing bright with certainty, anticipating. I start the fire, it's my desire to burn. I've got to let it burn. Take these lessons and learn and keep on striving, keep on thriving. Oh, I've got to let it burn. So so anticipating. I start the fire. It's my desire to burn. I've got to let it burn. Take these lessons learned and keep on striving. Keep on thriving. Oh, I've got to let it burn. Yes, I've got to let it burn. So let it Thank you so much.
Nice. I had to let it play out because the musicians were playing so great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's like I think like a slight delay. So it was like it's already like such a chaotic song to begin with, and then everybody was like kind of moving like this. I was like giggling. But yeah, and I'm thinking back, I was even thinking back to like what we were talking about songwriting or kind of making choices. Like even something like that is like it's such a it goes in all these places. And one thing I really wanted to do is sort of like as Betty did, right? She would just improvise. I mean, her song Sounds is just 25 minutes of her
Yeah.
improvising, you know. So didn't quite do 25 minutes, but I wanted this to be like a just kind of a moment to be open more for that kind of improvisation, which I know is like not for everybody, right? But I'm like I was also kind of giggling because I started almost every set with that song. So it's just like a bold like hit him right in the head with whatever we're gonna get up to today.
Yeah, I also wanted to watch you come back in, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and yeah, so just to see what that transition was going to be like, you know.
Mhm.
It was great. You were very much in control,
Mhm.
you know, real right there. That was really great. Band sounded great.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's you gotta, I think you gotta be really ballsy to do something like that, you know.
Yeah.
It's challenging. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's challenging. You know,
Yeah.
you really gotta be aware, be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, and improvisation, you know, scatting and stuff. I do a lot of like scat labs in honor of
Mhm.
Jay Clayton because she was
Oh yeah.
a girl,
Yeah.
and and so yeah, I'm coming up. I have a few workshops that I thought about doing. Well, they're immersive. You know, one is going to be one day and kind of, but one day of like, let's see, how many hours? I don't know, 5 or 6 hour workshop. And then the next month, I'm going to have a friend of mine who's a really great pianist who teaches a lot of singers. And he's going to be here and we're going to do a whole weekend
Oh
of
great.
workshop. So, that's one of those ideas that people go, "What? How are you going to do what?" Nobody's going to want to do that. And I don't care. I'm going to do it. So, but my idea is to take pieces of actions that help one scat
Mhm.
and do them for short periods of time, like 15 minutes, throughout the whole day or throughout the weekend. So that, because it's one thing to teach people how to, you know, whatever you're working on. Like I have one of my favorite things to bring up is chromatic scales,
Mhm.
because the use of chromatic scales and against chords, and to give people this sensation, inward sensation of how that sounds and what it
Yep.
feels like, is, it gives people familiarity with that, so that they're not cringing when they hear themselves sing a, a note of tension,
Right.
right? It's like, yeah, it's a note of tension.
Yep.
Love it. Go on, whatever. So things like that, but I'm going to be doing it all through, like for instance, give them 15 minutes of that, and then an hour later give them another 15 minutes of it, so
Um,
so it can soak in.
mhm.
And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm trying to think of different things that I can have them do that will uh, become comfortable within them.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a different kind of a workshop.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so hi Joyce. Yeah. Here's another Taylor question. Taylor. Um, wow, he has so many questions here. Um, let's see. I'm just laughing at a few of them. Let's see. Yeah, I like some of these last two, Taylor. I'm going to bring one up. Um, he says you both will likely have different answers, but what essential things are you proactively practicing when it comes to self-compassion for what you do? I'm laughing because that's a kind of a running uh, idea, and that Taylor contemplates.
Mhm.
So proactively practicing when it comes to self-compassion for what you do.
Hmm.
Or is there?
As I'm thinking about it, I don't think that there's like a ritual or something I'm doing like daily or even like weekly. I think that that is definitely something that I've like just developed that mindset to be more self-compassionate, and that's something I've definitely like I think had to work on like as a person, and then obviously connected to my music, but I think like being open to um, well, especially like in this last year for me is like kind of going for these bigger things, and when you get them, it's great, but like being okay if it doesn't go how you plan, or those kind of things. So I think like um trying to I think appreciate the work, but I think really knowing that like what we're doing is such a long-term kind of thing that some things may take many attempts. So I've
Yeah.
definitely kind of working on that kind of mentality.
Uh-huh.
I'm definitely like a big journaler, and like I find when I'm writing music, I'm kind of like at the piano, but I with my like music notebook, but I also have like a lyric book at the same time, kind of doing both together. So I do feel like I'm trying to be more proactive about like just building in that. I'm not quite daily. I need to be daily writing, but like that kind of process, and just being trying to like not be so critical, and just being more aware of like just being open to those things. But
Yeah.
that's a great question because I don't have a great answer to that. I think I could definitely put some more like ritual type things in place just to be kind of maintaining that. But so
Yeah.
thing.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this is, in his point of view, uh, important, let's say
Mhm.
that. And he asks kind of this same question in different ways. Um, just how do you deal with self-criticism, that kind of
Yeah.
idea, and how do you build your own confidence in what you do? I personally think it's more philosophical,
Mhm.
and you know, um, and as you know, when you're teaching this kind of a thing to somebody, yeah, you see a lot of different perspectives on this, right? Some people just
Right.
can't get past it. Some people quit singing or playing because of it. Um, and some people really get that it's a life process, you
Mm,
know, and the more that you're capable of doing it in your everyday life, the more you're capable of doing it in music. Sometimes the other way around. We're lucky to have music to teach us
mhm.
these life lessons, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, by the way, oh, Jamie Shu's here.
Oh, nice.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. I know. She said she loved this. I was telling you about this 2.5 year gig that I
Yeah,
curated.
yeah, yeah.
She performed there, and yeah,
Oh,
it
beautiful.
was really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another question that I like a lot because it's really a big, important question. And you being kind of a self-starter, you probably
Mhm.
have an answer to this. What thoughts do you have about social media and the way artists use it to promote their music? Is there anything you wish could change about the expectations of promoting?
Yes. No, I mean, and that is so funny because I feel like that is something where I've always been on social media and like using it as a tool, but I think like even more, I keep saying like just more recently because I think I've just really become more, I think intentional, but also just like willing to like admit and accept that that like just is a part of what we have to do. And I think that there are a lot of, and I don't mean this to like diss on people, but I think that there are some artists who like maybe like musically we're at a similar skill set or thing, but they're at a much higher level because their like social media thing, they've like got it down to like a science, you know? And I have been like, I'll be honest, like I've like literally like done a course on like making the best kind of like TikTok and Instagram reels. I'm like looking at different things. I've made like I'll make content calendars for myself, especially when I was like doing a lot of like album promotion and those kind of things. And there's definitely a part of me in the back that's still just like "Ugh," resisting. I don't want to do it, but just knowing that like that is just like the way that we communicate our brand to people, and it's a way that truly we can be found. I think it's also a way for venues to like sort of do their research on you. I mean, they'll certainly look at your website, but I know that venues look at like how many followers you have and followers on Spotify and those kind of things, which I think is like annoying on some level. But I also sort of get that they're looking for somebody who like has a certain kind of connection or sort of recognition already. So I've just kind of accepted like, okay, that's just part of what we do. And I have all these plans where I was gonna like do all these certain kind of reels and I haven't done it. But I have really thought about like what are different kinds of content that I could create that are different than just me singing at the camera? Because a bunch of people do that. But could I create like short, 30-second like educational videos or something fun where I'm, I don't know, coming up with some different ways to sort of like connect with what I do. And so I think that, yeah, it's an important tool. I think there's also like a really fine line of like promoting yourself without it being just like super aggressive, but also like if that's your style, like that's your style. But I think for me, as I try to find a balance of promoting things that I'm doing, sharing things without it feeling like I'm just like bombarding people all the time. But then again, I have to remind myself, well, some people are doing that and they're performing at these places. So maybe I just bombard and that's fine. So kind of just giving myself the permission truly to like, I think to self promote, because I think that's another hard part. Even if you feel like confident in who you are in your music, it's like that next step of like, okay, now I'm just going to continually like put it into the world and keep saying like, hey, this is me, here I am, I'm still here, I'm worthy of this thing. And I think just that's definitely all connected with music, but the like self compassion and self actualization, all those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a position, that it's okay to do that too. It's like if you're, a secretary or,
Mhm.
a salesperson or something, you're probably, good chance you're not really doing that,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a fine line of I got to do it. It's not like I'm bragging. It's just I'm finding the best that I do and
Yeah.
showing it so that
Right.
I can do it. So that it's
Yeah.
kind of selfish, so I can do it more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that like, there are certainly some people who have like a team of people who do that for them. I certainly don't. So it's just kind of like also like, well, if I want people to know like what I'm doing or this, like I have to just be the one that tells people about it. And again,
Yeah,
it's totally fine to just tell people what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, Taylor had an interview recently with a guy that I did an interview with also. Really interesting guy. Wow. His questions were incredible questions, just
Mm.
so much fun. His name is Jerry Fialka.
Mm.
And so Taylor said, he's asking a question that Jerry asked him. Do we think that artists have moral obligations?
Mm. That's an interesting question. I
Yeah.
mean, my like initial thought is just like, well, like I guess my question is like, how do they? Is the question about like moral obligations to do or say something specific with their music? 'Cause I think all of us as humans have moral obligations, and then I think maybe the question is like, should we be using our platform for those obligations? I'm not exactly sure how
It's a big
specific that is,
question.
but
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure knowing Jerry, it's like an open question.
yeah.
You know, it's the question, but then to interpret it like we want to interpret it. I mean, yeah, sometimes I think I asked you this earlier, or no, maybe I can't remember, but are you thinking, okay, do you wake up in the morning as an artist and, you know, say, I want to do this again. I want to awaken people again, today and whatever, however many days we can.
Mm.
Or do you just, um, that's definitely part of it at times. I think you said it when you were talking about either your originals or performing and making, in my words, making an impression on people,
Mhm.
helping them. Um, and are we supposed to do it? I mean, because obligation kind of brings that
A
into
weight
mind.
to that, yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean,
yeah,
I feel like for me specifically, like I don't think that I'm not like waking up and being like I'm gonna change the world with my music and I want people to like do all these things. I do feel like the music I've been writing and that I'm very drawn to is about these themes of like empowerment and self-love, and actually so much of this conversation, this sort of confidence and self and all those kind of things. So for me, it's important to like share those messages because I think especially also like being a woman in this music, there's like which we haven't really talked about at all, but there's like that layer of things that can be very challenging. And so for me, like getting to a place like where I do feel very confident with who I am and like being able to step into these spaces, like I do know that like part of like my artistic mission, I don't know what that feels also like a too big of a word, but like
right.
focus or vision is about like being able to reflect the things that I care about. And one thing the things that I really care about, personally are that empowerment, being able to truly stand in myself and being able to like be an example as a person who's literally standing and singing, but also somebody who's like singing these specific messages that it's not like, oh, everything's always great all the time. It's like, hey, this thing is hard and then we find this path or those kind of things. So I do feel like that is an important part of my artistry, and it is a hope for me that my audience feels like reflected in the music, that they maybe feel, supported and uplifted by the music, that they sort of see themselves in those stories. And I think that ultimately, one thing I'm really trying to do is to like create that sort of community or feeling around like lifting each other up. That's just something that I do find important. I don't think that it's like an obligation, but it's something that I do feel like very strongly about. Um, I do feel like there's also, so many examples of like artists who will use their music for speaking out against political things or, just making kind of bolder statements. I don't think necessarily that we are obligated to do that. I think that like we can and should if that's what we feel. I also think that there are people who like want music to escape from those things too. So like I think one of our sort of roles as artists is to just be able to like reflect the world but also like challenge the world, right? So we might the challenge can be outright speaking about things or challenging it by the world is in a really dark place. And so I'm going to challenge that by like sharing beauty and joy and giving people a space to like be in, to hold that and be in that. And I think that that is, again, I don't know if that's a moral obligation, but I think that's definitely like a, some kind of responsibility or a kind of a focus, I think, and a gift, I think, that we have too as artists to be able to create that and to kind of hold that space for people.
That was really well put.
Thank you. It took me a while, but I finally got there. That was a hard question.
No, that said it all, really. That was a very beautifully put. I'm going to have to re-listen to that and write it down. It was good. It was really good, Alyssa. Yeah, yeah, all of those things. That's yeah, especially with original compositions,
Mhm.
you know. But really with anything, as an artist, it's like, and you part of how you develop that awareness of like that you have come to is by seeing, watching, see, not consistently watching yourself, but just looking back and seeing what you are good at as an artist. You know, what really ties you in with the God energy and what people are touched by, you
Mm,
know, and that leads you into realizing uh, your purpose. Your purpose
yeah,
is, I should say,
yeah.
because there's not just one purpose. So yeah, and it's but anyway, you said it extremely well. I'm not going to try and repeat, you know, or say what I think about that because you said it all. It's
No,
very, very nice. Thank you for
cool.
saying that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And Taylor, thanks for that question. It was good.
yeah, great question.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Um, let's see. Um, you said that this year has been a special year for you, and so this is your time to brag.
Sure.
So tell
Well,
us a little bit about.
non-musically, I got married in October. That was really
Oh,
exciting and wonderful. Thank you
congratulations.
so much. So it was
Uh,
like the beautiful cap of this year of, you know, stepping into bigger spaces, and we had a really wonderful celebration. And I'm so glad that the wedding planning is over because I was doing that at the tail end of some touring, and then I just became a voting member for the Grammy. So I made my like first push through like the voting season. I didn't get a nomination this year, but like went through that process of like I probably sent like 2,000 messages out. I don't know, just totally insane. And the first day of voting was the day of my wedding. So it
oh,
was just like totally insane. So I'm glad that all the planning and everything is over. So that was kind of a, again, a non-musical thing. But I this year I became a voting member, which is just a great um, step, I think, of just kind of like getting connected with like larger part of the industry and kind of attending some local events. And I attended a bunch of Zoom events where I got to meet new members like around the US, which was really great. So I yeah, it's actually really funny to have these conversations. And I should say too, I actually just started, I'm doing like an Instagram live, like weekly kind of chat, because I feel like I've been having many conversations with people, kind of getting to like sort of the other side of kind of this like bigger year for myself. I'm like, okay, like what's next and these things. And a couple of people have reached out to me, like local musicians in Chicago. I'm like, I think we're gonna do that. So I did my first one actually last week with a musician in Chicago, just kind of like chatting. I
cool.
had some questions and just kind of a similar kind of thing. But so this year, what I was gonna say is like it's been really great, but I still feel those moments like after the end of something really big that like not depression, but there is that like letdown of like, okay, like you were just going and pushing yourself and doing this thing, and then you finally have that moment to like sit back and sort of like, yeah, just sit in that. So I've felt that the last couple months, but I was like looking back and my phone was showing some like memories on my iPhone. I was like, wow, I went to a lot of places. So I had the new album that came out in April, and I really decided like my one of my like biggest goals with that release was just like to do some touring like outside of Chicago, and so made a really big push for that. I did a handful of dates like in the Midwest where I could bring my band, but it's mostly me like flying solo and working with like local musicians. So I see. I did a bunch of debuts, which was really great. So I actually debuted at Dizzy's in August, which was really great. And that gig I got kind of last minute. So, but we saw like a really good turnout and a great time. And I was actually at Birdland the month before, and so I got to use the same band. So that was great. So musically, we
Yeah.
had a good time. So I did that. Trying to see where else I played on my tour was like, I mean, I'm gonna say quotes and tours because it was just like the whole summer. I had a gig. I like made my little poster, and I was kind of all over the place. But I played at Blues Alley in DC. I was in Texas for a few gigs. I got booked to do like a guest artist at a festival in San Antonio. So I did that. Brought my band down, and then we played at a venue in Austin and San Antonio. I debuted at the Century Room, which is in Tucson. I'll be back there in March, which I'm excited about. I went to Nashville to play at Rudy's Jazz Room there. And so I was just kind of like all over. Blue Llama, which is in Ann Arbor. And again, like my biggest thing was just like, I just want to get into spaces. So I definitely like invested some money in terms of like some didn't pay great and all that kind of stuff. But for me, that was just like a really great experience. And I will also say like totally exhausting because that idea of what I was like kind of joking around about social media of just being like, hi, it's me, hello, it's still me. I just sent like so many emails to people and like you get no response, or it takes like literally like several months, I mean like several months of following up with somebody, sometimes like several years of following up with somebody. I'll be making my debut at Mesro in 2 weeks on Sunday, December 29th, which I'm really, really excited about that. So just like trying to like get into like those kind of larger venues. And that for me, again, even though I've been doing things, it's like that first step really for me is like saying I could actually like go get a gig there. And then you get a gig there, and not to diminish it, but then I like the experience I had was like when I'm in these spaces and it's like, oh yeah, it's just a gig. I've done this a bunch of times. I mean, it's a beautiful, I'm so grateful and so honored, but like, of course I could do that. Right. So I think for me, like, that's been like a really big moment of kind of that. And I got on the Downbeat Critics Rising Star list for the first time. So that was a really unexpected. I got like a text. I was like on a walk with a friend, and I got like a text on my phone or my watch. I was like, oh my gosh. So that was really nice. And those things are, there's so many people who are deserving, and how they decide that. But it was just a nice, for me, feeling recognized in a year where I was really purposeful about trying to like elevate kind of my name and those kind of things. So that felt really nice. And then I think also with just like the writing and just feeling like I'm at a place where I just really understand more of my own music. I also do like arranging for vocal jazz ensembles. So I have a published chart. I just got commissioned to do another one, and that's another thing that I'm kind of exploring a little bit. But just feeling like, yeah, kind of like making that commitment, even though there was very like specific kind of goal based about venues. For me, the overall thing was like, I'm going to invest truly in myself in a way that's saying like, I can and should be doing these things. And then I'm just going to like be relentless about like asking people for the thing that I want. And I might not get it, but I also might get it. So that like a big thing for me this year was like being in that space and like accepting that that's again, like a totally valid and good thing that we can do for ourselves is just like kind of ask the universe, but also asking in a way that's like, I want to do the work for that thing. But also, can I have it, please?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. I was just flashing on, let's see, so I'm 71. I've been married 23 years. When I met my husband, I was, well, that was kind of before the computer was so engaged
mm,
with files and supporting and saving movies and sending out PR to people and stuff. So that I was still doing snail mail. I was calling up
wow.
Europe, and I'd get whatever. I'd get either a workshop or I'd get a gig, and then I'd build stuff
Sure.
around, and then I'd go and come back.
Yeah.
I wasn't making shitloads of money, but I was making enough to go and come back and have money to, to live.
Mm.
So, and so yeah, that was a time when I was really pushing hard to get whatever I thought of. And let's see, why did I was I bringing it up particularly? I mean, of course, obviously, what you just said, it's like you want something, you push for it, and you don't stop until you get a yes or no.
Yeah.
And it could take years
Absolutely.
for somebody, And also, I've had to deal with uh, several people who, like one guy just literally says, I don't like your voice. Okay, so I mean, what am I going to say? I
Right.
can't continue pushing because,
You have bad taste, sir.
yeah, but, it is what it is, and which is interesting because really I don't like the gig, so I don't know why I keep pushing for it, just because everybody does it. But he took over for another man, and who I used to work that gig with, and it was such a beautiful gig at that time. And then when that man died, I don't know what happened. It's in a museum, so the museum changed the location,
Mm.
and really, it's really not a very um, beautiful musical experience.
Sure.
So, although there's a lot of audience, you
Mm.
know, and they like the experience of it, but so, you learn to let go too. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so somebody actually said no.
Yeah.
So you just got to let that go.
Yeah. And those moments I think will always just be, the sting or that kind of like rejection. But I always just like appreciate actually when someone just like says no instead of like never responding to you.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
okay, thanks. Appreciate that. I'll try you again in a couple year or like a couple
Yeah.
months or a year or just not or whatever. But
Yeah.
I think that's important. And then I was thinking too about a couple other things I did. There weren't like big achievements, but just new things. I mentioned I did go to Jazz Congress this year. I went to the Gen conference, and then I also went to Jazz Ahead, which was in Bremen, Germany. And that I
Yeah.
felt kind of insane because that happened like the week before my album released, and then the week that my album came out, I was at
Oh,
the
wow.
showcase for like a 4 night run. So I'm like, this is probably a little bit too much, but I had a great time and
Yeah.
made some beautiful connections and those kind of things. So I think another part of this year is like really truly realizing that I think a lot of what we can do to help ourselves is like just putting ourselves in the room and sort of again like just hi, just making yourself be a part of the conversation. And so that's been
Yeah.
an important kind of realization and something I definitely continue to do as well.
Yeah. And those things, like those three places that you mentioned, that is what it is. It's
Mhm.
putting yourself in the room and saying hi. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been fortunate that I have had a record come out every year for a number of years because somebody was supporting me for that. But something like Jazz Congress, it's great to go there because then they go, oh yeah, oh, this is Cathy Segal-Garcia.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, and so there's a relationship that's
Mhm.
developed and
Absolutely.
secured. Yeah. I haven't been to Jen for a long time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been, where was that? Was that in, I don't think it was New Orleans. Let's see. It was, I can't remember
Moved
where
around
that
quite a
was.
bit. They kind of changed
Yeah,
up each year.
yeah. But it's been a long time, and I haven't really been pushing hard to do workshops nationally.
Mm.
So I do them internationally, but I haven't been pushing nationally. So and then Jazz Ahead, I've never been to that, and
Mm.
that's geared towards what?
Well, it's like I don't know. I mean, sort of like a jazz industry, but to be honest, like I mean, I forgot how many days were, but like the first day and a half, I was like kind of overwhelmed because it's like just this huge like exhibition hall, and the way that it's organized is sort of like by country of people who
Oh,
come, and so there's like a booth with people who maybe work with like, and it's so different. I mean, I've never performed in Europe. That's like my next goal that I'm working towards, like a lot of the like European countries like have a lot of like government support for arts,
Yeah,
so they have
yeah,
like funding to do concert series or
yeah,
programming and things like that. So there might be people who like work with those organizations who are there, and just kind of you could go talk to them. And but the first day, like I remember feeling like I'm trying to start a conversation, and sometimes people like just did not seem interested in like chatting. I think like, and I just didn't really get that. But then like the next day, especially by the last day, because people were just giving out like free alcohol. It was like everyone was super chatty and like very friendly. And like, great, okay. So, but that was like nice, even to just like for me. And this sounds like very kind of a naive thing. I just remember like feeling like, oh my God, like the world is so big. You know, like it's so much bigger than like I'm working really hard at this thing, and not to diminish that, but then it's like, oh, I'm just like one person in like one
yeah.
scene in this huge world, and there's like all of these other possibilities, which I think is beautiful. It can feel again overwhelming, just kind of like realizing the kind of like potential and the reach and those kind of things, but it's also exciting, you know. So I just even being there and kind of like just having that like realization of like how many concerts and festivals and all those kind of things that are there, and then now it's like setting up the time to be like going after those contacts and emailing and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. I always said I could do anything. You know,
Yeah,
I like speaking along those lines, but it's like a whole career in itself. You know,
absolutely.
if you really want to do it well. I mean, we could do it. It's just a question of putting time in. I mean, Kathy Cousins, a person from your general neighborhood, I mean, for years she uh had like whatever she did, like 4 days a week, certain hours a day, she would get on the phone for business. And
Mhm.
she'd create all these things that most people would go, "What? What are you doing?" You know, like painting in public and then having the music, you know, while you're painting and selling the paintings from the stage. I mean, she
Mhm.
she really has a big her father was a tailor basically, and he was a big tailor in Detroit, like did
Mhm.
big people. And he
Yeah.
said, if you don't get in the front door, go around the back. And she
Mhm.
just totally took that to heart. And so anyway, but as you say, I mean, especially through this show, you know, uh, I like you, maybe I'm naive, or you know, I was coming from, you know, how I felt as a kid, kind of like, oh, you know, oh, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
wow. But I was so impressed with the reality that creative people
Mhm.
are literally all over the world. They're all doing hard work. There's a whole bunch of fantastic creative artists. And also, I just got the real feeling like if it wasn't for us, this earth would be just a spinning ball of dust. You
Yeah.
know, we actually balance out the world.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so I'm very grateful for being in this community and having, you know, sharing that point of view. And a friend of mine, Michelle Nicole, I don't know if you know her, she's from Australia.
I have never met her, but I listen to her music. And actually, no, I don't think I met her, but I think she was at the Gen conference last year. So I think I've like
Probably.
been in the same space as her. She's an amazing
Yeah.
artist. Really, really
Yeah,
like her work.
she's done a lot of that kind of thing, like putting herself, you know,
Yeah.
in spots around the world to
Right.
expand. Very admirable to me. And
Mhm.
but also she's a friggin'
Yeah.
great singer, and very real in her
Mhm.
singing and her personality. And she and her husband just were in Prague for 2 weeks and
Mhm.
worked their butt off. And you know, you can see different clips and stuff. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. And you know, now she's going home, and you know, but anyway, they are expanding, and then they come back, and then they expand and come back. So that's basically what we're doing, right? We're expanding and coming back. I think that I can say that you're in a time of your life that is you're fortunate. You know, you're young enough to have the energy and the push that is fruitful,
Mhm.
and you're having really, you're at a high level, you're at a mature level, you know, and I mean, you have a lot of years ahead of you to really flower and, you know, do what you want and have a great time. Yeah, it's very, I congratulate you on, you know, where you're at.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, it's really a beautiful thing. Do you want to share anything before we get off? Because it's actually been 2 hours. Um, do you want to share
I
anything
don't
to
know if
tell
that feels like
people?
well, I would say that maybe just in response to that, and thank you, I really appreciate that. And I was thinking, the last part of what you said is like you're in a place to like do whatever you want, and I think that that's something that like as silly as that sounds, like something I like struggled with. I think for a while, kind of like naming like this is the thing that I want, and I think going back to that question of like finding your individual voice, but this is also more like career based, is like and we can't change our past. I wish that I was a little bit more specific like earlier on. I think that but I just wasn't maybe like at that point of, you know, just kind of like taking certain gigs because like that's the thing I'm supposed to do, or like somebody offered me this thing, and now I'm at a place where I've, you know, still have those kind of opportunities, but like now it's more about like, okay, this is the thing that I want to go do, and being just more purposeful about that gig or how I'm spending my time of like booking certain things. So I think that in addition to like finding your voice, I think it's also just like finding that direction and like the thing that you want to do, which again is like that beautiful but overwhelming thing. So I would guess that would be like my little closing comment.
That's good. I like that. Well, you know, again, I'm impressed that you're at the age that you are and you have a lot of shit together. And so to me, looking at you and where you are, I I mean, I see a very strong future for you, you know. So I think you've done a really great job, you know, and congratulations on being where you're at. And I know things are going to go really well for you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. I hope I see you in person again.
Yes, I hope so. I've never performed in California, but that's also on my goal list. So
Okay.
I'll keep you posted if I make it there.
Okay. Good. And just want to tell my listeners that every now and then I sweat, you know, when I first started doing this, I was doing 6 days a week because we were in the pandemic, you
Yeah.
know. It was like, ah! And so I did that for like 9 months.
Uh,
And then, you know, I dropped down to a reasonable, a reasonable amount of time.
yeah.
And anyway, so now I'm in like the once a week.
Mm,
However, there are certain people that I want to scooch in. And speaking of Michelle Nicole, there's this beautiful duo record she just made with a well-known pianist from Australia named Paul Grabowski.
mm.
And I just loved the project so much. So I asked him to be on the show. So tomorrow, but you know, I have gotten over forcing the artist to be Monday 12 to 2 because some people, yeah, Australia, they had to wake up at 5. I actually made Michelle do that at some point, and yeah, someone else too. But anyway, now I've grown older and I've acquiesced a little. So Paul, tomorrow, Tuesday, Paul is going to be on from 4 to 6 with me live. I mean, you can always see the archives and stuff,
Mm.
but anybody who's around 4 to 6 tomorrow. And I have to say one more thing about tonight. I hope you don't mind.
Of course.
So, a friend of mine, actually the man who supported my albums for a long time, he's been through a very hard period this year. He has diabetes and he lost both his legs, and he has some cancer, and he's like an angel guy. He's a total
Mm.
supporter of
Yeah.
a lot of people. And so tonight we're doing a tribute and a fundraiser for him at Catalina's Bar and Grill in Hollywood. And it's going to have a bunch of wonderful musicians and singers, and you know, it's going to be very, very nice. An evening filled with a lot of love. So if any of you LA people are there, and it's a reminder, the music starts at 8:30, so come. I think Dan's going to be there, so you know, you can give him a hug and you know, whatever. So okay, I've said my stuff.
Great.
Thanks for being number 598.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. We had a great time.
Thank you, and have a great evening and a great holiday season.
Too. All right. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.